The bright lights of the Family Feud stage cast a golden glow over the Williams family from Cleveland, Ohio. They stood ready for another round, but for Janet Williams, her thoughts were somewhere far away. She was a woman of quiet strength, her silver-threaded hair pulled back neatly, her hands often reaching for the purple heart pendant around her neck. It was more than jewelry. It was her anchor, a reminder of her son Marcus, who had been away for what felt like a lifetime. Her husband Robert stood proudly beside her in his neatly pressed postal worker uniform, the kind of man who believed in doing things right even when no one was watching. Their daughter Kesha, finishing her last year of nursing school, kept glancing at her mother, sensing the weight behind her mother's forced smiles. The rest of the family, Uncle Jerome and Cousin Tiffany, filled the line with cheerful energy, trying to keep the mood light. Across from them stood the Hendersons from Kentucky, a warm and competitive family, but the tension between the two families wasn't rivalry. It was anticipation. The game had been close, the laughter genuine, but something about Janet's distant eyes caught Steve Harvey's attention. He had been hosting long enough to know when someone carried a story they hadn't told yet. Between jokes and applause, he noticed the way Janet's fingers never left the pendant. It wasn't vanity. It was longing. As the audience laughed at one of Steve's classic remarks, Janet's smile faltered. She wanted to be present, to enjoy this moment with her family, but her heart was 2,000 miles away in a military hospital where her son was fighting his own battle. She had tried to keep her emotions hidden, but mothers don't fool easily, especially when their children are watching. Kesha reached out, gave her mother's arm a squeeze, and mouthed that it was okay. That simple touch nearly broke Janet's composure. When the commercial break arrived, Steve walked over quietly, away from the camera's glare. He wasn't the talk show host now. He was a father, a man who'd seen too many stories of soldiers and their families, and he could see the pain sitting heavy on Janet's heart. With kindness in his voice, he encouraged her to share what was on her mind. At first, she tried to brush it off, saying they were just here to have fun. But emotions have a way of rising when you least expect them to. The words came out in pieces. Their son, Lance Corporal Marcus Williams of the United States Marine Corps, wasn't overseas anymore. He was at Walter Reed Medical Center, recovering from injuries sustained in Iraq. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the room growing still around her. Robert, always steady, took over the story when she couldn't continue. He told of September 12, 2024, the day their son's convoy was attacked near Mosul. Marcus had been in command of his vehicle when an IED exploded beneath them, flipping their armored truck into an embankment. The fire spread quickly, the smell of fuel thick in the air, and chaos filled every second that followed. Marcus had a way out. His hatch was clear, his door still functional. He could have crawled to safety and waited for help. But he didn't. He went back inside 3 times to pull his team out one by one. A driver who couldn't move, a gunner bleeding from shrapnel, a translator trapped under debris. He dragged them all to safety while rounds cracked overhead. Then, despite his own wounds, he held a defensive line with only a sidearm and a rifle until reinforcements arrived. He was hit by fragments of shrapnel in his shoulder and leg, but refused to leave the field until everyone else was safe. By the time Robert finished, the audience was silent. Even Steve, who always had the right words, was at a loss. Janet's eyes glistened as she whispered that her son was alive, but his road to recovery had been long. He'd endured surgeries, months of therapy, and sleepless nights learning how to move his arm again. He'd missed birthdays, milestones, and his little girl's first words. All she wanted was for him to come home whole, not just in body but in spirit. Before anyone could respond, the show's producer appeared at the edge of the stage, a rare occurrence during filming. He carried a phone and a look that said something was about to change everything. The audience sensed it too, their chatter fading into curiosity. He handed the phone to Steve, saying it was urgent and related to the Williams family. Janet's heart nearly stopped. She feared the worst. But when Steve lifted the phone to his ear, the voice on the other end wasn't delivering bad news. It was a Marine colonel calling from Camp Pendleton, and he wasn't alone. His message was short but stunning. Marcus had been released from Walter Reed 2 weeks earlier, fully cleared for duty, but he had chosen to keep it a secret. He wanted to surprise his family. And then came the voice that Janet would have recognized anywhere. Her son's voice, strong and warm, filled the studio through the loudspeaker. He told her he was okay, that the doctors said he'd made an incredible recovery and that he was coming home. He said he was done with deployments. No more separations, no more missed moments. He was coming home for good. The family froze. Janet's hands shook as she turned around. From the shadows of the backstage area, a figure appeared in dress blues, medals gleaming under the lights. Marcus Williams stepped into view, walking with a slight limp but holding his head high. The audience erupted and Janet ran to him before anyone could say a word. She collided with her son in an embrace that seemed to suspend time. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered prayers of gratitude against his uniform. Robert joined them, wrapping his arms around both of them, his composure breaking after months of quiet strength. When the hug finally loosened, Marcus gestured toward the side of the stage. He wasn't alone. 3 men followed him, his brothers from that fateful day. The driver, Corporal Jackson, the gunner, Lance Corporal Rodriguez, and Malik, the translator who now stood proudly with his wife and son. Each man approached the Williams family to express gratitude that words could barely contain. They spoke of how Marcus had risked everything for them, how his courage had saved their lives, how his voice in those final minutes kept them from giving up. Malik's young son, barely 6, stepped forward shyly and handed Janet a crayon drawing. It showed a soldier helping others, the word hero written in uneven letters at the top. Janet knelt down, tears spilling freely as she hugged the boy. In that moment, the distance between nations, languages, and wars disappeared. All that remained was shared humanity. The studio was no longer just a set. It was a sanctuary for gratitude, sacrifice, and love. Steve Harvey stood off to the side, his trademark humor replaced by reverence. He had seen many things in his career, but this was something sacred. The surprises didn't stop. The producers had been working quietly with Marcus's unit and several organizations to honor his service. As Steve explained, the Marines had started a fund called Operation Homecoming to support Marcus's family, and it had gone viral within the military community. Donations poured in from across the country, over $400,000 raised to help pay medical bills and give the Williams family a fresh start. The generosity didn't end there. Veterans organizations pledged to cover Marcus's ongoing treatment, modify the family's home, and pay off their mortgage. Even the family competing against them, the Hendersons, stepped forward. Their patriarch, a Vietnam veteran, offered their entire prize money to the Williams family, explaining that it was the least they could do for a man who embodied everything good about service. The studio matched their gift, and what had begun as a game show became a national moment of unity. As the audience wiped their eyes, Steve announced that the game would go on, but differently this time. Both families would play together as one, and whatever they won would be shared. For the next half hour, laughter filled the stage again, but now it was laughter born of joy, not competition. When Marcus was chosen to play the final round, he didn't hesitate. His answers reflected everything he had lived through: family, sacrifice, love, and the small things we take for granted. When the results came in, every answer was on the board. The cheers were thunderous, but the night had one last moment left to give. On the big screen behind them appeared a general in uniform, announcing that Marcus was being promoted to corporal and awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism. The studio fell silent again as Marcus stood tall, tears in his eyes, his uniform glinting under the lights. When asked about his future, Marcus said he wanted to use his GI Bill to study physical therapy, to help other wounded veterans rebuild their lives the way his therapist had helped him. The audience applauded again, and Steve revealed that Cleveland State University had already offered him a full scholarship. The circle of kindness kept widening. Months later, when the episode aired on Veterans Day, it became one of the most watched moments in television history. But beyond the ratings, it touched hearts across the country. Donations to veterans organizations surged. Communities rallied to help military families. The story of a Marine who never left anyone behind inspired a movement of compassion and awareness that reached far beyond that stage. Marcus kept his promises. He visited other wounded Marines, encouraged them through their darkest days, and became known at Walter Reed as the Midnight Motivator, a man who reminded others that healing wasn't just physical. It was about remembering that they were still whole, even when life had left scars. He graduated with honors, opened a clinic dedicated to veteran rehabilitation, and filled it with reminders of what mattered most. A framed photo from Family Feud, his bronze star, and the child's crayon drawing that simply said hero. When people asked him about the drawing, he would say it meant more to him than any medal, because it wasn't about war or bravery. It was about a boy who got to grow up with his father because someone refused to give up. It was about choosing others over yourself, about love stronger than fear. The Williams family returned to normal life, though nothing was truly the same. They still watched Family Feud together every night, but now there was always a moment of quiet gratitude before the laughter began. Marcus's shoulder ached sometimes and his legs still stiffened when it rained, but none of that mattered. He was home. He was there to read bedtime stories, to kiss his daughter goodnight, to live the small, beautiful life he'd fought so hard to return to. In the years that followed, people continued to reach out, veterans who said that watching that episode gave them the courage to seek help, families who said it reminded them that no one heals alone. Marcus's story became a testament to what it means to serve, but even more, to what it means to come home and find a nation waiting with open arms. Steve Harvey kept a photo from that day in his dressing room, not the staged publicity shot, but a candid moment of Marcus holding his sleeping daughter, her tiny hand resting on his scarred one. It reminded him that television could do more than entertain. It could heal. It could unite. It could remind people that heroes walk among us, often quietly, often humbly, often just trying to get back to the simple gift of everyday life. And that was the message the episode left behind, that freedom, love, and sacrifice are bound together, that behind every medal is a story of family, of hope, of waiting hearts, that a hero is not defined by the battle they fought, but by the love they carry home. So if you ever see a veteran, the story urged its viewers, don't just thank them once a year, ask how they're doing. Listen. Remember that behind every uniform is a story like Marcus's, a story of someone who gave, and someone who waited, and a family that held its breath until they came home. Because healing doesn't end when the war does. It begins when we choose to care. And somewhere in Cleveland, on an ordinary evening, the Williams family still sits together, laughter echoing softly through their living room. Marcus rests his daughter on his lap, the purple heart pendant glinting around his mother's neck. The world outside keeps moving, but in that house love is already won.